Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Banter. I'm your boy Abram, joined as usual by Tucker Hazel, and we are here today, Tucker, to talk about Switch Pro. But before that, if you, the audience member, want to talk to us about the Switch Pro, the link to our description, as usual, top of the description, while you're
Nope,
rooting
Discord.
around.
Link to the Discord.
What did I say?
Link to the description. It's all the same thing. They're close
Fucking,
enough.
fucking go look in the description. There's links to stuff. Follow my Twitter, join the Discord, like, subscribe, ring the bell as well.
Yeah,
Tucker,
yeah,
who
yeah.
cares?
Yeah.
None of it's important.
I'm the
The
master
only
of semantics today. I just gotta let you know.
I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. I'm glad that you are. Just Tucker, forget about it. Wipe
Okay, all
the
right.
slate clean,
Wipe my
as though
nose.
we are yet another Switch Pro rumor that supersedes the one from the previous week. That'll be outdated by the one that comes out next week.
Yep.
Because Tucker, we are talking about the transient, the rumored, the probably real Nintendo Switch Pro, which will not be
Quote
called
unquote.
Nintendo Switch Pro,
Yeah.
but for the point of conversation, we're going to call it the Switch Pro because that's what it's being used colloquially to discuss this device online.
Very true.
Tucker, there have been rumors about a Switch Pro for, I don't know, 3 years now.
Oh yeah. I mean, easily 6 months after the Switch came out, they started.
Yeah. And
Maybe shorter.
we got the light, right?
Yep.
The light's a great little system. I bought one. I gave it to Jean because I wanted my dock in, dock out type of deal. But now we're
Yeah.
talking about the luxury, the boutique, the rumored to be currently, as reported by Bloomberg, the $400 device with DLSS compatibility. And for people who don't know, DLSS essentially, as I learned from the boys over at Nintendo Life, shout out to John Cartwright, who I have talked to on Twitter before. DLSS essentially means that through machine learning in this fucking chip, you can take a 720p image, stretch it out to 4K, and based on information that the machine learning chip has, it can approximate through an algorithm what color pixel should be in the space to basically blow an image up from 720 or 1080 to 4K, and it looks pretty convincing. So it's not true 4K, but it's simulated 4K and apparently
But
looks pretty good.
for little tiny dumb eyeballs like us,
Yes.
it'll look significantly better.
Yes. So we've got a lot of things percolating. Of course, I was not being reported on last week when the fucking Switch Pro is something different. And
Yeah.
certainly it's not going to be the same next week, which is why, Tucker, we're not really here to talk about any particular set of leaked specifications for the Switch
Okay.
Pro. What we're here to do instead is talk about what it would take for us to buy a Nintendo Switch Pro.
Yeah, we want to outdate ourselves a little bit, but not all the way through. We want to set ourselves up. Hey, this is when we're recording it. It's gonna be outdated, but then the conversation will be kind of timeless. It'll be a classic,
as usual,
like
like
a
most
Disney
of our
cartoon.
content.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yes.
we always we never make things that are outdated.
No, absolutely never.
Oh, never.
But Tucker, top level, in the first place, could you even be convinced to buy a Switch Pro?
I think it would be a pretty easy sell for me.
Yes.
I have had my Switch since minute zero. Got it launch line Best Buy
Same.
midnight on March 3rd, 2017. And I've used it easily at least every week since it launched, whether that be using it for games or for YouTube, because I used to watch YouTube all the time. But obviously played dozens and dozens and dozens of games, hundreds and hundreds of hours and dozens of games. The Switch is probably my most used console of all time, time-wise.
Same.
Probably the most games I've ever played on one console. Yeah. And because I've had it since launch, an upgrade sounds great. I am not the kind of person that is into consistent upgrading. I get a new phone every 5 years or so, or 5 years, until when my phone is cracked and broken and is starting to lose its little bits and bobs. That's when I get a new phone. And the fact that they don't release Switches so often, I think makes this a easy day one purchase for me as a day one, launch Switch owner. I didn't feel the need to get a Switch Lite because a Switch is essentially a Switch Lite, but does more things. But any kind of upgrade to the Switch, I mean, it's no question for me. And then I would be able to sell my Switch, keep it. I have a bunch of DSs, so maybe I would keep it, but these are a little more expensive than those. Or give it to a friend and allow them access to all sorts of Switch games that they never had before. So yeah, so a more powerful Switch, that's just ideal for me.
Yeah, so for me, there's really obviously what I need for me to buy a Switch Pro is an announcement and a pre-order page.
Yeah.
Um, but there's really two main reasons. The first is more practical. Also, I've had my Switch since launch day, and it's starting to really show its age.
Mhm.
I've got a couple scratches on the screen. The top is starting to expand a little bit. You know, where the heat sink comes out.
Sure.
A lot of the symptomatic problems that people have had with their Switches, I'm feeling right just because I
Mhm.
use it so much. My sister spilled chocolate milk into it. It survived,
Oh, geez.
but it's seen better days, right? So from that perspective, I'm more than happy to upgrade, especially since I have the base model. I don't have the improved battery,
Yeah.
that like soft upgraded model did with the different chip and better battery. So
I'm just gonna say battery life is like issue number 4 or 5 down
yeah,
why I would want a better Switch. I've had my Switch run out of battery on like a road trip or something like maybe twice in the
yeah,
last 4 years. It was never an issue for me. I always have it charging. It's always in the dock. I always bring a charger with me. So increased battery life, obviously something
yeah.
that's better. I would never complain about that, but yeah,
I got a nice licensed Anchor Switch battery bank, which I just carry around, which keeps me charged plenty and can charge my phone and everything. So that's not a huge issue for me either. But the point is, even a most basic upgrade is going to be good for me.
yeah.
At the same time, looking back to the DS and 3DS eras, I upgraded pretty much every time. I got my
Interesting. Okay.
first DS with a DS Lite, then I got a DSi. I
Sure.
had the original 3DS, got a 3DS XL, and then a new 3DS XL. Because I really love handheld gaming. I think it's my favorite way to play.
Sure.
And I personally find that, unlike a phone, which is a little bit more of a utilitarian device for me, I want to have the best handheld gaming experience I can.
Sure.
And certainly a different cost scale between upgrading my phone for probably $800 to $1,200,
Yeah, fucking
or
phones are expensive.
yeah,
Phones and computers are ridiculously expensive. When I
they're
was
ridiculous.
graduating from high school, going to college, and my parents like, all right, we're gonna like, get you a phone and a computer to push you through college. It'll last a
Yeah.
whole set of years. And I'm like, okay, that sounds fun. And then I was not ready because I
Yes.
in my mind, electronics are game console prices. And I bought
No.
my Switch for $300, and I'm like, hell yeah, computer for 500. No,
No.
oh
No.
God, a cheap
Nowhere near
computer is
that.
1,200.
Yeah.
Whew, they're expensive.
So there's a lot of factors for me that make this a pretty easy sell inherently. But I want to talk a little bit about the specific features you would like to see that would really sell the device for you. And so the way I frame my opinion on a Switch Pro is that I do not expect it to be even really marginally more powerful.
Mhm.
A lot of the reporting is suggesting that it will be, which is interesting, but it really cuts against a lot of Nintendo's design philosophy. They've always been about lateral thinking with withered technology. Shout out to Gunpei Yokoi. The idea of let's take weaker hardware, repurpose it with an innovative spin on it, sell it for cheaper, have bigger, profit margins and everything. That's been Nintendo's MO. They've never pushed the bleeding edge of tech. So I'm not really expecting a huge jump. The things I want out of a Switch Pro are more quality of life, personally.
So just first off, would you say you don't believe this particular recent set of rumors because of that? As far as I can tell, these are
Yeah.
the most legitimate rumors we've gotten.
Yeah, it's so even though it cuts against Nintendo's history, I do think it's real. I think this is a conversation for another time, but I think Switch era Nintendo is a much different company than
100%, yeah.
Nintendo has been. I think both in terms of leadership, but just in terms of philosophy, there's been a lot of changes. So I wouldn't be surprised. More, I'm reserved on the idea that this is going to put it even on par with a PS4 Pro or something, as
Sure.
people have been saying it should.
Mhm.
Even technology like DLSS is like workaround technology for
Exactly, yeah.
for weaker hardware to give it the appearance of something stronger.
Mhm.
So I do think that there might be a marginal power increase, but I'm not expecting, nor do I even really care for it to be super powerful. What I want are more quality of life features, like I said. But I'm curious, what are some of the things you want out of a new model?
To be honest, I have to say that I'm on the opposite side of that coin for a couple of reasons.
Okay.
I would prefer it to be more focused on a power upgrade you
Yeah.
know, whether that is the cheesed power upgrade of DLSS or,
Sure.
you know, something a little more substantial, which I assume even with the DLSS, it would also have a power
Yeah, it'll
boost.
be a little bit more powerful.
But I would rather focus on that, making the games run better, making the games look better, allowing larger scale experiences, allowing ports to continue coming over
Yeah.
that let me play these games on the Switch that I have been enjoying for the 4 years, and now I'm starting to feel its age, its lower power when I'm looking at the ports of games that I'm like, okay, yeah, that actually does
Yes.
not look good. Um, the only reason I
Sure.
would say I'm focusing on that is because, you know, in my mind, looking back at what Nintendo has done with their quality of life upgrades to DSs, to Game Boys,
Yeah.
you know, well, especially with DSs and 3DSs, even more especially, is the systems are not that different almost at all. If you look at menu layout, if you look at interactivity, it's usually a sparse one or maybe two features that consist of the upgrade. DSi, it's a camera and then internet functionality, but you know, kind of not really super integrated. The new 3DS is the C stick, but who the fuck used that? But they are relatively consistent, and because I don't have issues with, you know, I would love there to be folders, I'd love there to be themes, but I don't
Yeah.
really care too much about that. I would love to hear what your quality of life upgrades
Sure.
that you are looking for would be, but I don't know. I like the Switch enough as it is that having a more powerful one is really the draw for me.
I think the reason I don't think that that's as important is because when Nintendo needs to decide where are you going to draw the line between this just being a more beefy Switch and basically a sequel to the Switch.
Yeah,
I think it'd be a terrible idea for first party content to be exclusive to the new device.
sure.
I think that has
I don't
always
think it
been
will be.
well, I mean, you look at new 3DS, it did have some exclusive games,
Sure.
albeit few and far between, but still, I think that it was even a mistake for the few games from the first and second party that were exclusive
Yeah.
on new 3DS. I think that was a mistake.
Mhm.
If you want to give that power to third parties to have more ports, I think that makes a little bit more sense.
100%. Yeah.
And then maybe have cloud versions for the lesser models. I think there are workarounds there, but for me, I just think that that sort of power increase is what we want out of the next proper Switch. I don't. In its place, I think you should have some new 3DS esque benefits to on the technical side where games are going to run a little bit smoother, run a little bit faster. I think that's reasonable to expect, and I would like that. You know,
Yeah. 100%.
I would like a nicer screen and a little bit more horsepower so that Pikmin 3 Deluxe doesn't run at sub 720 because there are a lot of games that run sub 720 on Switch.
Yeah.
I think it is realistic to expect that games should hit a minimum of 720 in handheld mode, and I think that that's something that a Switch Pro could provide without being beyond the scope of what we've seen from Nintendo's hardware revisions in the past.
Sure.
So I would like that, but a lot of the things I would like are hardware level because I think you might be selling short a little bit what the past devices added. I
Okay.
think what was so great about the new 3DS in particular were that it offered a lot of very specific fixes to its hardware. The eye tracking 3D is a humongous improvement over the base models. The addition of the C stick was a very stubborn Nintendo solution, but it was a solution to a problem, as well as a second set of triggers. A lot about that device was nicer and had a better layout for buttons and everything. So I would like to see that translate to Switch because I think it has a lot of inherent shortcomings that a device in 2021 shouldn't have.
Sure.
I think there should be Bluetooth off the bat. I think the Switch really should have Bluetooth, especially as a portable commuter device. I always have my Beats that I work out in, and when I wear when I'm out and about. I wish I could connect those to my Switch. I know you can get the fact that you have to get like a dongle, a third-party dongle to use Bluetooth on Switch is ridiculous.
Sure. Yeah.
There are things like that should be ironed out. The screen should be a little bit nicer. It should be a little bit slimmer, I think. I think there's a lot of things that could be fixed about the Switch. That bezel should be thinner. The Switch is a sleek device, but it's sleek in comparison to Nintendo's past units, you know?
Yeah.
I don't think it's as sleek as a lot of other consumer electronics. I think that kickstand needs to be better. I think that the fucking flap for the game cartridge that always opens up a little bit. There are
Sure.
just a lot of issues that I think could be ironed out. And that includes maybe an update to the Joy-Con, maybe an update to the locking mechanism, because my Joy-Con will just slide off my system now,
Okay.
which seems to be more hardware on the side of the rail of the unit itself. So I think there are a lot of issues that could be easily ironed out with another revision to the hardware itself.
So I'm sorry I haven't been paying extreme attention right now.
Sure.
I'm on the old Google machine trying to
Good.
find out how much a new 3DS cost at launch. Do you know that off the top of your head?
Yeah, I think it was $200.
Okay. So it's interesting that that is less than a 3DS was at launch. Obviously, they priced it down. I remember
Right.
that whole
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
But I think a 3DS XL even at launch was also 250, even after the original model had been priced down.
I think it was 180, but I could be wrong about that.
Okay, maybe all these. I don't know why Google. This is not a complicated question. How much did a new 3DS cost at launch? That's a pretty. It's giving me Nintendo 3DS Wikipedia articles. There's all sorts of stuff. It's not easy to find out. But
to be fair, also the technology in a 3DS was not very expensive to manufacture by the time that the new 3DS was launching.
Sure.
In what was that, 2016, I believe. No, 2015 compared to what it cost in 2011. So there's also that to factor in.
Yeah, but I think what I'm trying to factor in here is I think what you're saying about all those physically quality of life improvements that maybe we didn't really have huge issues with at launch, but have become more apparent over the years. The weak kickstand, the weak cartridge wrap, which I've never had an issue with that, but I know some people have it stick and stuff.
Yeah.
The Joy-Cons and the physical locking mechanism, stuff like that. I think that's natural to expect, but I don't think those necessarily, in my mind, are a big enough upgrade to consider it a next revision. They're I mean, I don't know. Obviously, that's kind of a lot more along the lines of physical things that that 3DS iterations had. But it's the $100 supposed price bump that I think is really why I think they're going to be focusing more on power than maybe you're expecting, because even as we were looking at these 3DS prices, they went down or stayed about the same through the upgrades as they got more powerful and were better systems. They didn't change as drastically, and $100 price bump puts it on par price wise with the last generation consoles. Of course, this generation consoles are fucking magnificently expensive. Yes. But I think that there's probably more under the hood than you're probably expecting. I mean, that $100 price bump is pretty significant.
I mean, assuming that it will be $400, I think there's a lot to consider. I think by the time you put an OLED screen in there, which people are talking about, that could drive up cost a little bit with the fucking ridiculous component shortage that's happening right now. That's going to drive up cost. I think that Nintendo is also in such a strong financial position right now that they can afford to release that at a higher price and probably still people buy it. I mean, when they were releasing 3DS models, they needed that thing to sell because the Wii U was flatlining, so they had to price that incredibly competitively. I'm sure that had fortunes been a little bit different, the Switch still wouldn't be $300 right now, but it is because it will sell at $300. So I think Nintendo recognizes they could probably sell a Switch Pro at $400, which I think they can. So I think there's other factors to consider. And like I said, I do think that some kind of power increase is probably likely and some tricky magician tech stuff is going to happen at the same time. I have a hard time operating from the position of knowing Nintendo's hardware philosophy and seeing so many iterations of it for this to be a huge disjunction, but it very well could be, you know, it very well could be, okay, this is new leadership. We're trying something new. A lot of that old guard is phasing out. We're going to release a sleek and very powerful Switch. It's possible. I just think that speaking historically, it's more likely that power increase is more on the marginal side. It's more let's get frame rates a little bit better. Let's get resolutions a little bit higher. Let's mask some stuff with a better screen. Let's fix some hardware issues. Same as we've done with all of our other iterative handhelds in the past, opposed to basically making a PS4 Pro, Xbox One X iteration to the base Switch. I just think I think that's a little bit unlikely.
So thinking about all of this and
Yeah.
putting into the fact that we're starting to get a quicker cycle of rumors, which now are
Yeah.
seeming to be a little bit more legitimate. Is this a holiday 2021 launch, you think?
So yes, I do. There was a Bloomberg report, which I believe pretty strongly, where they had gotten in contact with a lot of Nintendo's supply and manufacturer partners
Yeah.
that said Nintendo is looking to increase their forecasted software sales for the year,
Oh yeah, I
and
remember that.
but by like a significant margin,
A weirdly large margin.
and have their hardware sales go from like this to more like this, which is a pretty big increase considering, what, 4.5, almost 5 years into the system's life, we're going to still
Yeah.
have sales tracking way. The only way that these things happen is with a hardware revision and a really enticing game or two games alongside it. So
Yeah.
so I do think the X factor is if they can physically get enough components to make these things.
Very true.
That's and I think that's probably why we haven't heard about this thing yet.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if Nintendo can secure what it needs to physically make these units, there will be an announcement fairly soon.
Mm-hmm. So my theory on this is that, and this isn't really a crazy theory, is that it is the announcement is being held off, like you said, but I think that it will be announced soon. I think
Yeah.
the Switch is strong enough for them to not need a year and a half of marketing in front of it. Of course, the launch Switch had 5 months of marketing before it came out, of reveal to release,
Yeah.
and this, I think they can go a similar route, especially because it isn't something that people have to wrap their heads around. It's the better Switch. It's going to have, and I think that comes alongside a larger holiday 2021 title that we don't know about yet, because we're currently living on the laurels of Mario Golf for the Switch's big title this year. Aside from
Yeah.
from our perspective, not necessarily worthy of power Pokemon
Yes.
remake,
Right.
but I think if you land a big holiday title, whether that be some sort of new Mario game, or I don't think Breath of the Wild 2 is this year, or something that is a tentpole for the year to end around with the Pokemon remake supporting that, I think that's really strong. Bring that into the front of the year. Pokemon Legends Arceus, Breath of the Wild 2. That is a launch lineup that kills. That
Yeah.
blows everything else out of the water and puts Nintendo back up sales wise, engagement wise, with Sony and Microsoft, even though they have their new consoles and they're putting out their next gen games. New mainline big games like that, the industry is going to notice. So I think that's really what's going to happen, and that's very exciting because we've been on a year and a half, 2 years, maybe more, sort of down run for the Switch of them releasing less, of them announcing less, of them sort of waiting back and seeing how sales do. So this could be a fun refresh that really gets me really reinvigorated with my Nintendo hype.
I think that all of this has to be contextualized around the idea that fucking, like, what's the metaphor? We're the frogs in the pot of water and you turn the temperature up slightly and they don't notice you're being boiled.
Sure.
The idea of you're in the middle of something so you don't notice the intensity changing.
Mm-hmm.
We are so ingrained in Nintendo's hardcore that I think it's hard for us to recognize, because the software is not directly speaking to us, that
Yeah.
that 2021 is already a very good year for Nintendo.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're one of the bajillion people who hasn't played 3D World or Skyward Sword,
Yeah,
and then you get a Pokemon remake, Nintendo has Pokemon, Zelda, and Mario in 2021
that's true.
already.
Yeah.
And that is for the overwhelming majority of Nintendo's consumer base right now. That is 3 new Pokemon, Zelda, and Mario games.
Yeah.
And then you put in Monster Hunter, which is already tracking in Japan to be the biggest launch since Breath of the Wild. I mean, that game's gonna be fucking huge.
For just games?
Yes, that game's gonna be fucking huge.
Okay.
I'm telling you, this game's gonna be fucking huge. I have it pre-ordered. I'm excited for it. But this is a year where Nintendo is speaking past us, and I'm hoping that a revision like this could speak to us with
100%. Yeah.
one or two. I think this year still has room for one or two big games.
Yeah, I agree.
And another one or two smaller games that speak more to you or to me. A Metroid and something else. I think Metroid is pretty likely. I think a Mario Party is pretty likely. I've talked about both of these.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think that the big title that you push alongside a Switch Pro, and I read about this recently, is Mario Kart 9. I think Mario Kart 9 is launching this year. I really do.
And that is certainly the holiday title that I think starts off
Yeah.
a strong next Switch life cycle, because that does lead right into Pokemon Legends Arceus and Breath of the Wild 2, whether that be spring and early summer, something like that, maybe.
I totally agree. And I also think that people have been talking a little bit about the idea of like Nintendo adapting the Apple model, which I think is a little too surface level. But I think one thing they can take is that Apple unveils products in like September and launches them in October. Their turnaround for shit is so small because they have such a fan base behind them that will buy that hardware that they can move it. I think Nintendo recognizes that they can do that too.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that I don't think even getting to June without a Switch Pro announcement means that there's not going to be a Switch Pro in 2021.
Yeah.
I think they recognize that they can, whether it's Super Mario 3D All Stars, which they launched 2 weeks after announcement to 7 million copies sold,
Yeah.
or a new piece of hardware, they can announce and launch that in quick succession and do very well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think new hardware is likely. I think a couple new games are very likely. So we'll just see. And like I said, I'm on board. I didn't need a whole lot to be on board, but as long as if I get a bigger battery, which is a given, Bluetooth, smaller bezel, nicer screen, that's all I want.
Now, I think the fucking L factor here, it's not quite the X factor. It's kind of a crappier factor. Is that maybe we get some sort of Nintendo Switch Online revision that comes with a console revision, and of course applies to the older Switch models as well.
Yeah.
But it's a reason for them to push it alongside something rather than it just being a random update.
Yeah.
The video going around yesterday that is now at like 7,000 dislikes and 6,000 likes or something like
Yeah.
that, which, poor judgment on Nintendo's part, but is that they're rewording their classic game libraries through Nintendo Switch Online. And maybe we're reading too much into it. And in fact, I think it's likely we're reading too much into it. But I think that having something for me to connect to outside of just power and some minor hardware revisions is a reboot to Nintendo Switch Online that does bring in not exactly what we're wanting, but slightly more, because that's how Nintendo works.
Yeah, I think there's actually a lot of merit to the idea of here is the next piece of Switch hardware. Here's where the Switch's UI and software is going, and here are the games that are going to take us into the next era. I think there's a lot of merit to that idea conceptually, and this more business-focused Nintendo that we've been seeing, I think, probably recognizes that too. So I don't think it's unlikely. I think we need those components to come through for Nintendo.
Yeah.
And if that can happen, I think this is all fairly likely.
Now, I want to end this with something you sort of joked about before we started recording here, is that you are part of the problem and would buy a Switch revision every 6 months.
Yeah.
Do you want to expound on that a little bit? Is it just kind of a meme, or?
So it's a little bit of a meme because like I didn't buy a DSi XL,
Sure.
or I didn't buy a new 2DS.
I didn't even know there was a not XL DSi.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen one of those. My brother has a DSi XL.
Yeah, I just had the standard DSi. It's about the size of a DS Lite. But I was joking a little bit, but I really love the Switch's ecosystem, like I said, and I am willing to invest in it. And as long as, basically what I meant by that in a more thought out sense, not just a meme, I would buy one every 6 months, is that whenever Nintendo has a legitimately compelling upgrade to the Switch's hardware, I'm willing to purchase it. I'm not looking to say, okay, I'm going to buy a new Switch, let's say this September, so I'm set until 2 years from now, right? If they have something compelling, I'm willing to invest in it. And
sure.
And I think it's the same with people who buy these phone revisions over and over again. When something's compelling, they're going to latch onto it. And I think that's the same here. So we'll see. But I also don't expect Nintendo to come anywhere near that level of iteration.
No way.
I really think we could see if this is a substantial upgrade, I could see like the Wii Minis and the 2DSs of the Switch, these sort of cost-effective, Let's push more hardware, not particularly hardcore focused revisions.
Sure.
But I think whatever comes next will be the big one, and it'll carry us. If they want to switch to last 7-8 years, well, we're gonna hit 5 next year. So
already well on our way there.
Already well on our way there. So revision right now makes sense.
Yeah. And I think that does it for our conversation here. I want you to do the outro this time because you usually just give me a little bit of a weak goodbye after I do an outro, and usually whine about my outro. So let's see how you do.
Tucker, we finished the meat of the video, and here's what I want to say to you.
Okay, I'm listening in.
We've talked for a long time about making a Switch Pro video, and we just hadn't done it. But we finally did it today, and I think we did a very good job.
Thank you.
I think it was a very insightful discussion. I think I did most of the work.
Yeah, very true.
But, you being here, I don't know, boosts my confidence.
Oh, thank you. I'm very glad I can do that for you.
But I think we've had some fun. We've told some jokes. We've told some lies, and I think it's time to get out of here and move on with the rest of our day.
All right.
As time time will pass, and we will leave this moment forever. But the audience can always rewatch this video, and reconnect with this moment. And Tucker, when we get older and we have children and we die, and time forgets
this video,
and time forgets about even us, Tucker.
Oh, not possible.
Our children can find Backlog Banter 15 years from now when we have 410 subscribers.
Whoa. And
Tucker, they will be able to reconnect with this moment in our posterity. Can you believe that?
I can't. That's mind blowing. I like that you assume that we'll be dead 15 years from now. We just have to wait and see, everyone. If we're dead soon.